certificate or not.
No, we don't.
I got it brought in along. And some of these medals I've got, they're kind of.
Were they issued you in Korea, or?
They were issued to me. And it was from being in the different.
That's the Korean medal.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I remember that one. I have the ribbons. Yeah. Here's what I have, the ribbon.
Yeah.
And that's the National Service ribbon. I remember that one.
But those things, that's the thing that I'm kind of feel sad about, that there infantry badge. There's people that's tried to say that
That's the UN, isn't it?
Yeah, it tells you on that.
Korean service, yeah. You have 3 battle stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you when.
United States of America. I remember, I still have my ribbons. I still even have my dog tags.
No, I don't have my dog tags.
I have my enlisted and commissioned dog tags. I can give you the numbers, 44, 130, 942.
Yeah.
That was enlisted dog
I think
tag.
I can almost remember my serial number. It's US 550987, something like that. It should be on that W2.
55058987. You sure do remember it. My commission serial number is 0954608.
You had to remember that number.
Yeah. Heck, I don't remember my rifle number. That wasn't that important and basic. Are we ready, Conrad? Today we are interviewing Jerry Walls, who lives in the New Market, Indiana area. He's a native of Lawrenceville, Illinois. Jerry is a veteran of the Korean War. Jerry, where were you June 25th, 1950? Do you remember that day? It was a Sunday.
June when? The 25th, 19.
Yes, sir.
I was most likely working for the state of Illinois or for my dad on the farm at that time.
You were?
Yeah.
You were, let's see, June 25th, 1950, you were 22 years old, am I right? Or 21?
I was, as I remember, I should have been maybe 23. I don't know, I might be off. I keep thinking.
1928, 22.
I born in January 1928.
You'd have been 22 and a half.
Okay. But then it was in 1950 of November when I actually was inducted into the military.
Where'd you take your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood.
Were you trained as an infantryman?
Yes and no. I started out as an infantryman, and I had some shots, smallpox shots and stuff, and I got ill from that, and they put me in the hospital. And then I just worked as like a laborer or something, you know, taking care of fire in the barracks and things for a few weeks, and then they put me in a training for the combat engineers. So actually I didn't get a complete, even though I got in the infantry after I got over there.
Okay, after basic, where'd you go?
After basic, had a little bit of time off, maybe, you know, ever what it is, kind of, they give you a furlough. And then I went on a train across the United States, from out to San Francisco, and around in there in the
Camp Stoneman, maybe?
I don't remember it. Finally remember the name of the camp. I might remember too, but it was around in there. I'm trying to think of some of the towns right close to San Francisco.
Pittsburgh?
No, that wasn't it.
Okay, then you went.
But wherever I was at, in this camp, they took me right there and put me, we crossed on a boat or ship or whatever you want to call it, but got to be careful around the Navy, what did you call them? But anyhow, I went across the Pacific and to Japan.
To Japan.
And I departed from Japan on the end of Japan. I can't even remember that, but I do know it went into Pusan.
Okay.
And Pusan, I traveled on train up through there for quite a ways before, and then somewhere up in there I got on truck and took me on ahead up to the line. What
was the name of the outfit you joined?
Well, it's a 32nd Regiment of the 7th Infantry Division. I remember that part of it. Now, the company I was in, I don't even remember the company I was in over there, but I was in the 4th Platoon when I finally got in there. But this is 32nd Regiment, and the reason why that sticks in my mind, I got a little card, don't have it anymore, and it had a little ditty or a note or something on there that they'd give me after I'd been in there a while. And it says, you fought with a swashbuckling skill, and it shows a little pirate on there. But they had this. I tried to keep, I don't know when I lost that thing, but I carried that in my billfold for a long time, you know. And this is would have been a good Millward memory, you know, to have, but I didn't. But I can remember that I had it.
Were you actually in combat under fire?
Yes, more than once.
Was it because of the Koreans trying to come south?
The
North Koreans?
At one time, but some of the times being under fire, that we were advancing out onto them, you know, I mean like a patrol or something like that. But that's I had the most close calls that I know of that I had, you know, that the good Lord didn't let them take me at that time. It was mortars.
Mortars?
Yeah. Because that's the thing that 9/11 triggered in my mind. Because this thing, you know, and then I had started having flashbacks about the close calls that I had in Korea. I hadn't remembered them things for quite a few years, and that's weird. And I started telling one of my youngest daughters about it, or my youngest daughter. She, one of my daughters. But anyway, she said, Dad, and I started that, and I haven't finished it. She said, I want you to get some tapes and tape down all the experience you had. But I can remember, really, I know 3 that I can remember real definite, you know, about mortar.
Describe them.
Well, the one they might not be in sequence, but...
That's all right.
But me and a young guy, he was a skinny little feller about like I am, Tisdale was his name, and he was from California. And we had advanced on this, okay, we were on, I call the mountain, and then there was a lower hill out in front of us. We were going out different times, different companies off this higher mountain, taking this lower one. And the reason why we were doing it, because all I remember, it was on my right when we went out. There's a valley from this little mountain, a little hill or whatever. But we'd go out there and run the Chinese off of it. And I say Chinese because the dead ones that I seen were Chinese. And we would take that hill. So sometimes it would be harder to take than others, you know. But this one, the first time I remember this, like it's Tisdale, and we'd got to a stopping place on this as we went up there, you know, got in there. And we'd stop, and we started digging them. foxhole, just reckon that's what you want to call it, a trench. We had them little old shovels, and we was digging like mad. And we had dirt piled up probably 1.5 feet or 2 high, and we'd had it down about a little over knee deep, the trench that we had. It was about probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 foot long. And we had a Sergeant Davis and Bennett and Lebedeff, which was a South Korean who was attached to us, was sitting up on the hillside, and I was actually in a 57 Recordless Rifle Squad, you know. And I'll show you in a minute. I've got a little picture here of what a 57 Recordless Rifle looks like. But anyway, mortars, they started throwing them in there, and all at once one hit close to us, right up behind, probably shook Lebedeff and Bennett, and dirt flew on us from that, but it was a dud.
Wow. It
didn't go off. And those guys piled right in the hole with me and Tisdale. And if you want to go ahead and hear this other little anecdote, but you know, these things I say about this, there's some people look at me kind of foolish, like I'm making up a story.
No.
And it's hurting me on that, you know. But this Sergeant Davis, I was a PFC, and he says, Walls, he laid his helmet down and his rifle out there, told me to get it. In the meantime, that little dirt mound I was talking about there, it was a small arms fire from somewhere, from the enemy, had knocked some dirt on us from that, you know. And back then, I didn't know the Lord as my Savior or anything. I don't want to repeat, but I told him, you so-and-so, you get it yourself, you know. And he said, I'll have you court-martialed. And zap, I didn't have a... I mean, I can't believe I did this, the type of person I am now. But we were trained to be killers, that's all there was to it. And I jacked that back in there, and I said, if I'm to be court-martialed, it'll be for a reason. Never did hear any more about it.
Wow.
I mean, that's one of the times.
How long were you in Korea?
Probably 11 months. I think of it that way. It might not have been quite that, but there's sure a lot of happened in that few months that I was there. I mean, and they had us out on this one patrol. Bob Harding was the guy over us, sergeant, and we went out, and he was fussing and fuming because we were supposed to go out to find the enemy. And he says they know where they're at, we know where they're at, and he didn't think we had any need going out on this patrol. When we got out there, kerwham, they started throwing mortars in on us, and we know to a short distance we could get to a safer place. So we were heading back towards our line and running like all get out. And I was one, when we went out on a patrol, I tried to have all the ammunition with me that I could. I had bandolier. I mean, I just would like to have had a picture of that to see what I'd look like. But I had bandoliers, 2 or 3 of them were hanging over around my neck, you know. And then I had hand grenades, you know, in my pockets, and loaded down. And when we started running back, one of them bandoliers fell off, and I thought it did. And when I got back to where I could examine, I seen right across, right here, right about my stomach line, there was a slit. It was cut all the way down to it was winter time, my warm underwear thing, but went right through a fatigue jacket, went through a shirt, and that was shrapnel from a mortar. Wow. That had come in. So that, and another time, we were standing on this mountain I was talking about, we were on, and then went out to take people, take the Chinese off. They dropped the mortar. Some reason or other, I don't know what it was doing there, but we were stationary, and I was on the hillside, just like a straight up and down piece of ground, you know, and that mortar hit on top. And I looked right down to the bottom of the feet, and they'd had, I don't know why, it must have been somewhere to keep the rain off or something. I can't remember that part of it. But shrapnel come through there, and I looked right down to my feet, and that was, you know how sometimes when you see metal red hot, I mean it was red hot. It just come, you know, within probably a few inches of me. And of course, mortars wasn't the only time I had, like I say, I started remembering all these crazy things, you know, and I thought, well, man, I had quite a few of them, you know. But the next, I'll tell about the other mortar. We had taken this little hill, you know, and we were up there looking at, the guy said, hey, here's a brand new Russian-made rifle, and it was, you know. And here, there's 3 or 4 of us standing around there looking at that rifle. We knowed better than to do that. We'd just taken the hill, you know, and kerwhoom, here come in another mortar, and there was debris flying from it, you know, and it wasn't close enough to get us in it. I don't know whether that's what you want to hear or not, but
Exactly. These are experiences of Korea.
And another time, this particular hill that we kept taking so many times, you know, and I don't know, I went up, we were going up single file because they were mines and booby traps and whatever, but these guys went ahead of me, you know, with this hill, and all at once stopped. And they were small arms weapon, you know, the enemy was firing at us at that time, and we were on a steep incline, and I lifted my head up like that, and I don't know whether you know how it sounds, a bullet, when a bullet makes a popping noise, you know, real close to you. And I could hear them popping noises, and then there's some weeds just wilted in front of me. But in the meantime, I was trying to dig little indenture there. I mean, little with I had my shovel on the backpack there, but I couldn't get to it, and I took my steel helmet off, and I digging. you do the strangest thing. And another thing that happened to me on that same hill, not the same day, but this, I can remember this guy, don't even remember his name, tall guy, was a sergeant, red-headed, and when we took this hill that one day, and I was back behind him, and all at once, here a Chinese jumped up out of a trench. And I tell people when I'm telling this, I said it reminds me of some of these movies you see, like a John Wayne or something. But that guy, he turned, him and that Chinese, I was where I could see him. He looked like they saw each other about the same time. And a sergeant he made about I don't know whether it was a half turn or what, like he was coming back my way instead of going advancing. And I don't know whether it hit him in the head, what he's doing or what, and he just squatted down on one heel and swung right around with the rifle that he had, and he really worked he went and got rid of that Chinese. I mean, he was a dead guy after that, but excuse me, I'll leave that lay for now. But anyway, that's another experience that, you know, happened to me, and, you know, people wonder about it. And
how long were you on the line then?
One time, I think it was it was almost 60 some days. It's 50, it was up in the high 50s. And I would like to have a picture of myself because I never have been able to wear a beard, but I had a beard, you know, at that time. And we hadn't actually, I think I had some clean socks, but I hadn't actually changed clothes. Because sometimes they would take us back for a shower point. And we just go through a shower, and of course you just get rid of what you had on and get something near your size. I mean, and put on clean clothes. And that's another story too on that, but I don't know how much of this that I can get told or want to tell about what was. But like I say, this is not basically all in sequence. I think that when I very first went over there and went online, we went up on these here, like they wasn't somewhere around 6 by, I mean they call
6 by 6.
Yeah, but we rode up there on them trucks and on that, and this mountain or hill we got on, they had them all numbered. But the first one I was on, the main area, I didn't stay on it. And you come out and there's a ridge come off of that thing. And I felt like I was going north. I don't know if I remember now whether it was actually north or not. But, and it had a ridge. You know how you have ridges comes from mountain. But this here ridge went out so far and it made a dip. And then out on the very end of it, it come out kind of level. And it was a straight drop off. I don't know how many feet, but really straightly drop off. And there was a company, or platoon, not a company, a platoon of people, they set us out there on that. We made our own booby traps and things, and I know that was the first place that I was at. And this here is another red-headed guy that was with me, and I can't think of his name, and he was a character too. There been some things I could tell about him. But these holes, foxholes are already made. And they says, don't fire, don't use your rifle, but use your hand grenade. In other words, you didn't want them to know what kind of firepower you had. You're sitting out there on that thing. And we were set out there for a good while, I know, because I can remember one guy kind of got over the hill in his head because they took him off. He was, you know, what they might, I don't know what it was, you know, he just shocked or, but he just couldn't stand it or somewhere or other. And I don't have anything against people that's happened to. The only thing is I was just glad that they didn't keep him around, you know, when the rest of us, where they could cause us to be harmed, you know, because I don't know why I was one of the persons that was able to face some of this stuff, and I didn't go nuts, as I said, you know, I mean. But anyway, we were out there for a good while. But then they were going to have some replacements come up, and they told us what had happened. Had a truckload of guys that was coming up. Some artillery had landed in that truck and kept them from coming up. But while we were out there, and that's the first I'm talking about when I first went up there that first night, this red-headed guy was in there with me, and they said, you know, throw a hand grenade. Well, I sat there, and there's some broken down stuff where artillery or something, you know, had been in some stumps and things out there. They wasn't big ones. And evidently, I thought I seen them moving or, you know, or something. And I thought this guy was asleep. We were supposed to be 2 hours on, 2 off, just two guys in there, and especially of a night. And all at once, I pulled the pin on that grenade, getting ready to throw it, and he grabbed my arm just like that. And he said, don't throw that, there ain't nothing out there. Well, he's holding my arm for a while. And I said, what do you want me to do, this hand grenade? I said, I've dropped the pen. And he said, throw the, so-and-so. But, I mean, just little things like that, just like every day. And then another time, where there was a spring right down over this thing out there, where it was at very first, a spring down at the bottom of that hill. And it come my turn, everybody got their turn, but they had Lister bags, call them, to put water.
I remember those.
And then halogen tablets to put in them. But we had a big bag up there, sitting in that area on a tripod, but we'd go down there with smaller ones, like maybe about 5 gallon or what it was, but go down to that spring. If you could hear them gooks, that's what we call the enemy, you could hear them down there jabbering sometime, and I know they'd throw mortars, our guys did somewhere, throw them from somewhere down trying to get them. But you could hear them down there jabbering of a night. They'd use that same water hole we was using in the daytime. Man, was I ever scared. I believe that's, as being feeling scared, I believe that's one of them, and it's jungly like. And when you come, I mean, it's just like, I couldn't climb up that kind of thing like these guys talked about climbing up mountains, Why, they were just about like, I mean, it was hard to hold, handholds to get a hold of. But I don't know, like I say, I don't know how much of this to tell you it happened to me. I don't know.
This is very interesting. These are experiences people should know about. Jerry, how long were you in the Army when you got home?
It was probably about 3 months or so.
Where'd you spend your last 3 months in service?
Fort Sheridan, up here.
Fort Sheridan.
Yeah.
I have to ask you a question. What was the reaction of the people at home when you got home? How'd they regard your service?
Well, most of the people that I was around, they weren't against you like it wasn't a Vietnam thing. I mean, you didn't have that, but they didn't seem to think it amounted to too much, I mean, it just like, of course, guys in World War II know that. There's no big fanfare, about what you did for your country. I mean, from the general public, it just seemed that way to me, But yeah, it might not have been true, and it might have been just. But my reaction was that.
I think your reaction's accurate. People didn't care. I remember the first Sunday I was home, the preacher was talking about the little old police action in Korea. I got mad.
Yeah.
It wasn't a police action, it was a war.
Yeah, I did too, because there, to start with, I had a couple of younger brothers at home at that time. And I got a brother that's 1 year younger than I am. He'd spent 4 years in the Army, and he was in the Army Reserves when the Korean War broke out. And that was he's 1 year younger than I am. That's rather a year and a month younger than I am. And he was over there. Before that, when somebody's training, he would what they used to call the Rangers, in the Rangers.
Right.
But when he went over there, he was like in the more or less like the combat engineers. But he was one of those guys that was over there before I was, because see, he already had Army training, and he tells about being behind enemy lines, like where he was at. And so he won't talk too much to me about it, when they were up to the Yalu River.
Yeah.
And Noble,
that was in the wintertime.
Yeah. But neither one of us wanted to be, even try to see each other while he's over there, because we just figured we might be trying to watch out for the other guy, and then we wouldn't, because that was my idea of like while I was over there, you had to keep your mind on what you was doing, you know. I mean, you didn't, because it seemed to me like some people got to feeling homesick or this or that, or maybe they had a good girlfriend or a wife or something, and something there, when you don't want to be thinking anything like that when you're in combat, because if you do,
you're too good a target.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to make a mistake. That's all there is to it. But that's the way I thought of it being happening. But anyway, only reason I think that sometimes I can talk about the war, and like I was talking about there, I never killed anyone, like far as from here, you know, 6 feet or something like that, or even 10 feet. But I never killed anyone where I could see his eyeballs, you know. And we had a guy close to it. I remember him, Sergeant Henry. He said he'd always whetting his bayonet, and he'd swear, and he said, "I want to see what it feels like to just bayonet one of them so-and-so." Well, he got in a tight spot, and he had to do that. And I can understand why a lot of World War II guys couldn't talk about some of the atrocities and things that happened, because they were right physically, or the sight of it. Now, there's a thing that comes back to my mind when I'm talking about that red-headed back guy a while ago when he turned, and
right.
I remember walking down along there and seeing this young dead face looking at me, which is a Chinese, and as I went by, I glanced back. And he didn't have anything, the back of his head, you know, was all blowed out. And then another time, I didn't want to ever get wounded or taken prisoner. I can remember this same hill, and it was raining and muddy, and they had South Korean people were doing this ammo bearer. I can remember this one GI being carried on that litter, you know, just moaning and carrying on, saying he didn't want to die, you know. And I don't know whether he did or not. But I thought, man, I didn't want to be wounded and have to be carried off, you know, one of them things like that, you know. I mean, but still you had helicopters and things. And like this same hill I was talking about, we take it more than once. We had a young, now there's another guy named Hellstrom, but I'm trying to think of this guy's name. But he'd trained to be a sharpshooter, you know. He had this scope and everything.
Right.
And he was I don't think he was only about 19. Of course, like you say, I was 23 by that time. I was 23, you know. And we got out there on this thing, and sergeants, they'd leave a rear guard. They'd be some of us stay back while the rest of them marching off, you know, because we literally wouldn't get off that little hill till they'd come back on it, right behind it. And he stayed back there, and it kind of got in like a little, wasn't really a firefight or something, but it, pretty close to it, I suppose. But here he come up, running up there from behind back there to us, just out of breath and just a panting. The sergeant asked him what in the world he was doing up there, but he was using swear words. You know, we use that pretty often. And anyway, he said, "They're shooting at me," and I mean, he just trembling, but somehow or other he didn't realize he was in a war until that time. And he was a young kid, and he just went to pieces. He said, "Well, they're shooting at me, you know." And yeah, what do you expect? But and then another time, him and this other kid, after he'd been in there longer than that, we had a lieutenant that sent him out to try to take a prisoner, like that one place when we were on, where I was talking out on that point.
Yeah.
And they didn't take all this stuff to make noise and stuff. But they got out there, you could see a bonfire over there where the enemy had on this hill. They got over there, but they didn't, where they could safely get a prisoner, but they were going out to get a prisoner, I mean, you know. And then like talking about that first guy I had, this red-headed guy, I don't know when he finally got away, whether he went and, see, you would rotate. I mean, they've had the rotation thing, you know, after so many months, and they was pretty good. I think they was getting to rotate them home within less than a year time, a lot of people was over there. But we come by where this dead Chinese was, and he seen that guy had a nice, looked like a watch or something on his hand, you know, and it wasn't a watch. It was a compass. Just to see how, now this is another ghoulish fact. I mean, here that guy, he went and said, I said, well, they might be a booby trap or something up there, you know. And I just got away from him, and he got a wire. This guy was decomposed enough that he pulled that thing off his hand. And then and I just saying, well, what do you want that thing for? He said, well, I'll find me some alcohol and put it in alcohol and stuff, you know. And I was never so tickled in my life. He went and put that on a stem or something on his pack or stuff, and we was going through some brace, and he drug it off and lost it. I couldn't, you know. And that's another thing, that part of that hill one time we was on there, that there's a smell that I can't describe to anybody. And I suppose undertakers or something, they might know this stuff. Or people that's been there, they'll know what I was talking about. But there's where dead bodies are, you know. And I wasn't able to get used to that. I mean, I don't know how many days but maybe I was almost probably 20 some days or so where these guys were decaying right there close to us, you know. You couldn't really do anything with them. I mean, you know, if they booby trapped or whatever, you don't go messing around.
You don't go messing.
And then another time, it just seemed, looking back, it just seemed strange to me. We was riding in one of them 6-bys, and we was going through a muddy area, and this particular place, there was some old artillery. It looked like some of them where you go around some of these here old Civil War place where these old cannons and things, some of that kind of junk was around. We was going down through there, and I was sitting back there in a truck on one of them where these other trucks going in front of us, and I'd see him, he's running over a place, and I could look way up there, and it looked like he's running over something and just flopping up. You guessed it. I mean, when I got up there, they was running over a dead body, and that every time they run over that person, that, of course, is Chinese. And and another time, I'm trying to think of his name, like I was talking about, we went up to a valley, and way out in front of us, there's a hill, comes straight up. But this valley, and then we went off to the left, and you off to the right. My company was on the right at one time, and then we was over on the left another time. On the left side of this valley, they said that was where the Heartbreak Ridge was.
Wow.
Could I take a quick break?
Yeah, I
got out of California when I was going to get on the boat, the ship, go across. This is a strange thing. When we got to get on that boat, they went and was out there playing the music and stuff, and they was played so long. It's been good to know you. You know, it used to be that. And going over, why I got to be a KP for talk about a bunch of sick guys. Those guys on that boat were sicker than all get out, you know, and they just couldn't help herself. And I just felt a little uneasy, but I know what. And then when we got over Japan, we went to Japan. You know, well, what did you think they was playing for us there when they had the band out? If we'd known you was coming, we'd have baked a cake.
Where were you in Japan? At Camp Drake, the first Cav camp, or down Sasebo?
Probably Sasebo, yeah. I think that's where it was.
There was a big army camp. I forgot the name of it.
But you see, when that was real always strange to me. Like when we went on a ferry boat across from Sasebo over to Pusan, and had to have life jackets on. I mean, that thing would have just, there wasn't no compartments or nothing. That thing would have really went down it or sunk. I mean, good. But I'll tell this a little bit about Japan when the experience I was over in Korea, and they give you some R&R. They call it rest and recuperation. But us guys call it different name, and I ain't going to speak to what that was, you know. But we'd go over there, and when we went over to Japan for about I think I used just about a week. But that's the first time I'd ever rode on an airplane in my life. I haven't rode on very many of them anyway. But when they went and took us out of there in some kind of a troop plane from out of Korea, when we went on R&O, and took us over to Japan. And that is a beautiful sight to me when we come into Tokyo, where we went. When we come back over there to Tokyo, and you could just see, I've seen pictures where it just shows the red ribbons and the lights and everything. I could look out of that plane, but you had to be up more or less in where the pilots was, because we just sat in there. You know, you couldn't see out of that. That's a boxcar type plane we was in. I mean, but we went over there, and first thing you know, we had to have a little Japanese girl, you know, and that's like to say, some of them parts of life I don't know if my wife would want to know, or anybody else. You know. But they were some soldier guys over there. After I've lived a little bit of life, I can be proud of them. Some of them was very true to their wives. Some wasn't, but some of them was, and some of them enjoyed Tokyo as like you would as a tourist, you know, and really enjoyed it. But where do you go have these, get acquainted with these Japanese girls? Why, the one place motel finally I got to stay, why, it was like Japanese and American mixed, you know. You could have, but one of them places you had to, you had to sleep on a little old log with a little bit of something tacked onto it for a pillow, sleep on the mats on the floor. And I never realized, a lot of times people talk about how hot tubs now, well, they had a hot water for you to, and those little Japanese girls, they wanted you to take a bath, and these things, you know, before you ever had any other kind of close contact, you know. I reckon that's the first I better go saying something like that. But anyway, this went around through Tokyo, and went out to probably eat in some of the best restaurants, as good as restaurants I've ever eaten in my life, you know, over there. And that was a pretty good experience, but I don't know as it was such a good thing, because I had to go right back into combat when
It was over.
Yeah, when it was over. But I don't know whether that relate to the war experience, but that was part of it.
It's part of it. You know, Jerry, I'm going to add one personal comment. I was over in Korea 15 and a half months. Every time my turn for R&R came up, I was either in Mokpo or in Jeju-do. I never got to go.
But I enjoyed that R&R. I mean, it was, of course, that was, some of the guys had fun, they thought, you know. I mean, I did too think that way, because I used to and a lot of people that's been over there still do. I mean, but I used to enjoy, or thought I did, drinking beer and having a little shot of something else, you know, because I just might as well tell that part of it when I'm over in Korea too. So I'll go to another spot. We had been up on line, and sometimes they bring you back for a little while back in the rear, maybe like a couple of weeks, you know, from the, or so like that. We were back, and we had mess tents and sleeping on bunks and tents back there in this area, and it's back behind the lines. And some of these, I don't know why, but they had a whole tent there, had it set up to where you could go in and you could get any type of alcohol that you wanted to get. You know, you didn't have to be an enlisted person, because or what you call, I mean, like a sergeant or, you know, higher.
Top 3 grader.
Yeah, they could get all that, what we call the good stuff, you know. I mean, they had that there. Well, I got more of the good stuff than I needed. And there was a cook. And I felt so embarrassed after it was all over with. I talk about things you don't think you're ever capable of doing, and I still wonder whether I really did it. But this cook, I had a .45 that I carried a lot of times when I was the gunner on that, or the thing, you know, and I was carrying that, had that .45, and one of my friends or something took the clip out of it. But I went to this cook and was giving him a hard way to go. Like, we had a guy by the name of Moody, had got wounded in the buttocks, and he wasn't back very long, you know. He brought him back back on the line. And some of those people, they were getting to work in the cook stations, you know, and I was giving this cook a hard way to go. And because he was back there and they wasn't making any room for somebody like that, you know, to work back there. And come to find out, this guy had been over there before and re-upped. And here I was giving him a hard way to go. And I apologized to him because I was waving that .45 around when I was telling him all this stuff, you know, and telling him how, you know, they're not working it right, you know. But I wasn't all the good guy. I mean, and another time, I had a real good friend, Sergeant Walensky. He was a Jewish guy. And me and him started out as a private. And he was all along, and he was a two-rocker sergeant over there.
Tech sergeant.
And he was over our platoon, and he come out, and the Army's the Army. I mean, that's, whether it's Korea, where's that? I mean, they wanted your buttons buttoned where they're supposed to be buttoned, and this and that. And he was dressing me down out in formation, and these were people that higher up like that. I don't know where, probably at least up to colonel out there when they had this formation. And here's my friend, but he's also the sergeant. And I turned around and I swore at him and told him what he could do. and And the master sergeant over him, he said, "Get that man's name, rank, and serial number." And and he said, "You will go out and dig latrines." I don't know how it was, 2 or 3 days there. And my friend sergeant give me a requisition to go down to regimental headquarters and get me some South Korean boys to go out there and do that work. But that's one of them incidents, you know. But the sergeant, he went and told me, he said and I never did go, he lived out in Los Angeles, he said, "If you ever come out, Jerry," he said, "I'll make you a brand new silk suit." And when I got to the place where I couldn't find any contact, you know, that I thought, well, I would like to go out and see him, you know, after the war experiences. But to go on ahead back in to Korea more like that, why, there was one time we were like I was talking about that Heartbreak Ridge thing in there. When I was on the other side, on the right-hand side, one time in there, we were sitting up there, and some of us were back in reserve, and others were right on the very front line, you know. And you had some of the other UN people that was higher up on the mountain than they was. And I loved to see them Ethiopians and the Turks. The Turks, the Ethiopians come through there one time, and they had the bayonets on. These are black people. I mean, they were warriors, and they said and they had their bayonets put on, and they said it was a rule that they couldn't take them bayonets off until they drawed blood. But I'm glad to have somebody like that on the side, you know. And them Turkish people, they told stories about those Chinese or North Koreans didn't want to have nothing to do with them because they literally went out and hunted them down like we'd think back in the old days, the Indian, the hatchet. But that was another strange thing. Those Turks, when they come up through there, they had a half a side of beef. One of them guys was carrying it. I mean, this is like fresh beef, you know. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, they were going to cook that. And another thing is, the Chinese we were so close together up there. I could hear them jabbering, but this one guy said they talking English to him, and they said, you said something about having their own truce, you know, or something. And I mean, that's how close it was. Wow. But the thing that comes to my mind, and I don't remember, I think it was a rock, they call them, those...
Republic of Korea.
But they had, I don't know why they were covered, or what, you know, like that. But when we went over there to relieve on that side, on where I talked about this particular position, you know, they had trucks down there. And I mean, they had them quartered up in there, dead bodies in that trucks that they'd taken off of that hill. And that was close in there to where the Heartbreak Ridge thing was. Only it was over on the other side of this valley. But those guys, on that same hill, now, I don't know why, but I get emotional when I go to think about this person. But we were sitting up there, me and some other guys, and the patrol was out. And there was a bunker over there, and the North Koreans or Chinese had a bunch of our guys pinned down. You could just, you know, just like watching a movie type thing. And they didn't seem like we was going to get any help in there to help them. Well, after it was over with, this guy, I knew him, Brown was his name, and he was black. And the reason why I get emotional is so many people in this country, some of my people that's relation to me, just because you're black, you're no good, you know. They've had experience with black people or something. But that guy took a machine gun and stayed there and saved, I think it was 7 or 6 maybe, white guys. Walked out of there because of him. He died. Brown did. But now that, you know, and since you're acquainted, you know, to that person, and then you know what happened, then I hate to know the facts before you, whether it's white, blue, or yellow, or what it is, know the facts about a person before you condemn them. And that man was American as anybody else that's ever lived in this country. But now that really, that gets to me. I don't know why, but it really gets to me. I mean, you know, because you like for people to get credit where credit's due, you know. But I still believe it's the only reason I can talk about some of these things that I wasn't personally. I killed people with that 57 Recorless. I've seen when I went and used a white phosphorus shell that we throwed in a bunker. I've seen people running out of there, and you know that was just, they were literally burning.
Yeah.
You know, but I wasn't where I could make eye contact, you know. But it's, and then you take over on the other side of the hill. There was a guy by the name of Gula. He was from Chicago. I can remember this is one little good instance on that side. That he opened up a package that he got from the States. Oh, pretty good, nice big package. And it had when he got through unwrapping it, is popcorn. And in that, amongst that popcorn, well, it was a pretty good size, it was a hexagon-shaped bottle. Old granddad. I mean, tell you. And that was, you see movies or you hear people talk about sipping, there's the difference in the taste of that stuff when it's aged, you know, and when it's probably 100 proof or something, you know, better, you know. It's not like that old Seagram's or something like that. But anyway, that was really something that
you really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And Jerry, people do not appreciate, after you've been in a risky situation, that helps you relax. Mm-hmm. Civilians can't understand that. I did a little sipping along the way myself.
But I wouldn't, you know, the ones that people didn't, you know, I don't, it's all right, you know, but like I say, I wasn't a born-again Christian then. I'd done a lot of things but if you're going to tell the facts, you got to tell that part of it too. I mean,
that's part of the story.
And another thing, that same hill, like talking about getting emotional, and this kind of blurring my mind, but there was a couple bodies on that hill that we found that had been mutilated, like testicles and stuff like that, you know. And that's another reason why, you know, that there was people on the other side of what they would do to you. And this here experience of seeing that, but on that same hill, we had some, they call them CTTs or something like that. What do they call them? It was a civilian South Korean workers. They just about like a pack train bringing some material up. This same hill, where we cleaned that out, there's a couple of 3 incidents happened on that hill with me that I remember. This one guy, we were behind the line, and they were throwing mortars in. And right now, when I'm telling it, I'm seeing this in my mind's eye. They threw mortars in there. This one guy, he was out behind there and he was shaving or something, you know, like say the Army sometimes, you know. But he was destined to go home that day to go right rotating back when they threw them mortars in. And I seen one of them civilian workers. He got a foot blowed off. And I mean, I had to be looking out of I was looking out of a bunker, and that was just an instant. But I swear, I seen the bone, and him running, and just made a step or two on that bone after his foot was blowed off. And this guy, other guy, I was trying to think of his name, that I know he died afterwards. But he was another one of those guys. The shrapnel come up and hit him in the groin, and I know it had to be shock as much as anything. But when I seen the medics had him and everything there, and he was just crying out. He said, "I don't want to die," you know. Well, he did, but those things, they come back to your mind, and it's like it happened today. I mean, it's vivid and clear. And another thing, on that same crazy hill, there's a place where the rock and stuff, you couldn't have a trench. And we had to go back. We had a bunker up on top of this thing. We're kind of over the edge out on the front side. But to come out of our bunker to go get supplies or something, the enemy could see us. And they had a pretty good sharpshooter, but he thank the good Lord he wasn't sharp enough to get any of us guys, or he didn't. But I wasn't the only one, but I've went through there more than once, and the rocks would fly off where the bullets would. I mean, there had to be a 50 caliber or something that them people were shooting at us too. I mean, you know, you just
ricochets and. But
that was an area that we knowed how that you really moved it, and you stayed down low. I mean, when and on that same mountain, Bob Harding and that 50-70 cordless rifle that I showed you there had a tripod thing, set that up, and he was a good gunner, so he was using me as the loader. I was putting the shells in, and we saw a bunker out there that we wanted to blow up, and he throwed them shells in there, just real one right after another. You know, I did, and then he fired. And he said, "Let's get the HELL out of here." And we run, I mean, probably as far as up here to Main Street, something about that far from this right here. I mean, run just like, you know, that was it. We got it there, and I slid into that bunker and turned and looked back in the exact spot. Those guys had that zeroed in. I mean, it's a pile. I mean, they was dirt just flew right up in the air. I mean, there wouldn't have been nothing left of Jerry or Bob Harding, neither one, if we'd have just. I mean, it's probably seconds, not more than a minute at the most. I mean, you know, I mean, it couldn't have.
They had your spot.
Yeah, they had that zeroed in. So that same hill, like we was talking about, that little valley in between, they went and put up some of that camouflage netting where they couldn't see us supposedly going up through there, and we went back to the rest area, or back to get the change of clothes back in the rear, and we'd come up, and this is Bob, no, Hazelhoon or something else. But anyway, there's a couple of sergeants, and we was going up through there, and they throwed some artillery on us. I don't think they's mortars, but they throwed some artillery in there, and they throwed some. I don't know how many of us there was in a bunch, but they throwed some right in front of us, and then the first thing you know, they throwed some in the back of us. And I don't know, one of those sergeants said, I heard you're supposed to just go ahead. And that's when I used the hell word again. I'm what you guys going to do, but I'm getting out of here. And I made an exit to the right, and I got over to where there's some tanks, and they had some places in there, good places to hide out. And I jumped in this hole, and first thing you know, I heard the guys talking and everything, and they said, "Wonder where Wall's at." Of course, you know, kidding around there. He said, "The last I seen him, he's still heading towards Busan, you know." that's south, you know. And I come crawling out of there. I just got in a safe place, and you know that they were just kidding around about like that. So we was back, you know, one time getting our clothing and stuff like that, and where the vehicles made tracks or tank tracks or something, and I stepped off one of them, and I really sprained my ankle pretty bad. I had sprained my ankle. We had to walk a ways before we get in the trucks or anything to go back there and to get that shower point. And then we got back there, and you see like where these tents and things is like this, we was staying in them tents while, and I said, moaning around there, and one of the friends of mine, we had these Mickey Mouse boots that, I don't know whether you know what I was talking about, the insulated, we finally got them, where the guys, very first guys went over there didn't have them. They were insulated winter boots that you could wear.
I never had those.
Yeah?
All I had were the old lace-ups.
They were, I mean, they were something, because, and this guy thought he said, well, you need to rest or something, and I was laying there with my feet crossed like that, and he come along and just kicked me just as hard as he could in that ankle, you know. It didn't do no good. When I went to they said, oh, you'll be all right, you know, taped it up a little bit. I thought, yeah. But I was mad at the supposedly friend, because here I still had to work on that ankle, and if I had to move real fast, And another time, we stopped as we was coming back from one of those things, we stopped into where the artillery was. And those artillery guys didn't all have it made. They had sandbags up about 4 foot high around their tents and stuff. We stayed all night there. Well, them rascals, them are behind the line type enemies, they riddled that tent with bullets. I mean they firing, but we was down behind. I didn't sleep good that night. I mean, I want to be back up on the front line where I know where they's at. I mean, you know, most of them are out in front of you up there. But that is something else to even see the country, because I remember. Because when I went over there, it was in the summertime, and that heat, when you walk up, and the humidity, you walk up the mountainside, it's just prohibitive. I mean, it just something. And I can remember staying in a little, one of them places, staying in a little old mud hut overnight, and I should have just stayed outside, and the police about eat you up. Because them little mud Korean huts, they had like your heating things, they had them through the floors, you know.
Yeah.
And I've seen some other things over there that were quite, I mean, they've impressive to me, where they had these, must have been places worship. They're real nice places, mahogany type, you know, wood and stuff like that in these buildings. And I've seen them there little places where they had the Buddhists sitting around. And like one of them pictures there, if you'd looked, you'd have saw that was close to a rice paddy or something like that. And there's a lot of them fields there, just rice paddies. And another time we were back, I was pretty green there, and we were back in the rear, and I liked string music, or I call it country music, you know. People got talking about a banjo, and you know, they told me to ask this Korean where the banjo was. Well, that was a word for outside. Yeah, I'll never forget that. I didn't.
Banjo wa doko desu ka? I think that's Japanese. Where's the bathroom?
Yeah, but there's some. And then another time, I got so aggravated that one guy, he'd been over there and he'd had some plastic surgery does, but he might have had something else that hurt him in his mind too. But there was an old papa son out just walking around. He'd have just picked up the rifle and firing at him. And then I've heard of I didn't think that was very good. And then they heard of one time we was back there, kind of a rare place, so these guys had went out scouring around, and literally they had, in this day and age, you'd say that they'd forced themselves on some Korean women, you know. And I thought, well, I had some sisters at home, you know, and it just upset me. You could see why sometimes the people we were supposed to help them, you know, would be disgusted with our behavior, you know. I mean, I just didn't like that kind of doing things at all. But and then when we was back in this one area, well, we were supposed to guard the garbage dump. Anything that we hauled out, wasn't supposed to let those Koreans come in there and get into them garbage dumps, you know. And you know, I didn't have the heart to do that. I'd just watch our guys when they, whoever what it was, whether he was a sergeant, whether he was a lieutenant or what, when they was come zipping out through there with a jeep, you know, I'd tell them Koreans to get out of there. I'd let them go out there, because they'd get that garbage and scrap, you know, and put it in some of the old big tin things that our cooks had, you know, where food had come in, and they used them. And they get them little bitty fish, and they just cook all that stuff up into a soup, you know. I mean, they starving, you know. And you had to feel sorry for anybody, you know, no matter who, what war, or who it is, when they get displaced to where you have, I know a little bit when you see even these wars we're having now. By being in a place like that, I have a little inkling of what's
going on.
Yeah, and I just can't see anybody with the mentality of not being able to support the troops. You know, we're have people in authority lie to us all the time. So, but if you're serving your country, you go by the people that are over you, and you do what they asked you to do as much as you can to your ability, you know, and you don't want to be blamed for something that you didn't do. I mean, but I don't know. Now, I had a younger brother that was in that Vietnam War, you know, and but I did ask some of the guys, there's a lot of old World War II guys that's over there in that Korean War, and I'd asked them about, I always thought World War II was, he said, well, this is just as bad as World War II. He said, the only thing is we had more, it seemed like we had more air support. Yeah. I mean, you know, the enemy had more was able to get to you more with the air than, see, about all we had over there at Bed Check Charlie, our airplanes. Man, I'd love to see them guys come in with that napalm to clean out a place. And we see, like a couple of different times, we see a wounded plane, as I call it, and we just cheering and yelling, hoping that guy'd get across. You know, we had air panels out, you know, to get across to where he'd be over in our territory, you know, instead of before he had to bail out or something, you know. But I tell you, them, I always love to see that the airports come in. I mean, they
helped a great deal.
You ain't kidding. I mean.
Well, Jerry, thank you very much. This has been very, very interesting, and thank you for volunteering. We appreciate it.
Well, like I say, it's strange how a person gets talking to no more months than I was over there to see how much
you remember.
Yeah, how much happened in your life that's strong. Where the other lot of your life, you just like another year went by, you know.
Well, I think